All right, guys. So right now our main character is England. And we know that in the race to claim land in the Americas, England was the last to join. And they had their first attempt to ever claim land in the Americas in 1587 with the story of the lost colony of Roanoke. And we know this ended terribly. In fact, we say it ended in an epic failure. But if at first you don't succeed, try again. With the death of Queen Elizabeth I, King James I takes over, and he decides to try again in 1607. And they have England's first successful settlement. They name that settlement, that town, after King James I and name it Jamestown. And we know that that was indeed connected to a famous story, and you will be watching that movie today. Through our sketch to stretch, we did learn the answers to these questions. We learned that they did end up naming England's first successful settlement Jamestown after King James I. We know that there were 105 men and boys on board the 3 ships that came to Jamestown, and we know that they were looking for gold. And because they were so focused on finding gold, they never bothered to prepare for winter. And when winter came, tragedy struck and half died. They did decide then to make someone their leader, and they chose very wisely John Smith. And unfortunately, John Smith gets captured by Native Americans, but John Smith gets saved by the chief's daughter, Pocahontas. After that, the Native Americans and the colonists started to work together. And with the help of the Native Americans, the colonists eventually learned how to grow something. They never did find gold, but they learned how to grow something which is as valuable as gold, and that was tobacco. And you can see the tobacco plant here. What famous story is connected to the story of Jamestown? Well, that would be the story of Pocahontas, which you again will see today. So again, Jamestown, Virginia is what we're focusing on with the famous story of Pocahontas. So what I want you to do is take a quick second. You can pause the video if you need to and see if you can figure out what fills in these blanks. Okay, so Jamestown, Virginia was England's first successful settlement. We know the story involved 105 men and boys who came looking for gold. Wonderful. In the middle of the story, pause if you need to read through them and think them through. We know that after the first winter, they didn't prepare well for that winter, and half ended up dying until they decided to make someone their leader. They chose John Smith, not John White. He was from the story of Roanoke. This is a different John, so many Johns. This is John Smith, and he, as the leader, made one simple rule to save the day. He said, if you don't work, you don't eat. And so people kind of tried to combine the working with the looking for gold. We know the story ended because, and take a look at these, decide what fills in the blanks here. We know John Smith gets captured by Native Americans led by Chief Powhatan, but he was saved by the chief's daughter, Pocahontas, and that created what has been known as the Peace of Pocahontas. And that allowed the Native Americans to teach the colonists how to grow tobacco, which was as valuable as gold. So there are going to be 2 different movies that you're going to watch. One is, I will put the link up here for my favorite hero of history, Mr. Betts, and he'll sing a song about Jamestown. But I'm also going to have you watch a movie about Pocahontas, and it's not going to be the Disney version. The Disney version of Pocahontas is not very historically accurate. When people watch the Disney version, they're very confused. They think that Pocahontas and John Smith fall in love, but nothing can be further from the truth. When John Smith and Pocahontas first meet, Pocahontas is a little girl, probably close to your age, and John Smith was a grown man. They didn't fall in love, but I will say they did love one another, more like brothers and sisters love one another. In fact, they considered themselves brother and sister. And the reason for that is when Pocahontas stopped her father, Chief Powhatan, from killing John Smith, he says, fine, I won't kill him. Instead, I'll adopt him. Kind of officially, in the eyes of Chief Powhatan, made Pocahontas and John Smith brother and sister. Now, one of the reasons this is so very confusing to people is because Pocahontas does marry an English colonist named John, but it's again a different John. It's not John White, it's not John Smith, it's a John named John Rolfe. But lucky for us, he doesn't go by John. He uses the nickname Jack. And so in the movie, you'll hear the love of her life be called Jack Rolfe. Now, she does fall in love and marry Jack, and together they have a son named Tom. And when the movie starts, you will see Pocahontas and her husband Jack and their son Tom on a ship that is leaving Virginia and heading to England, heading to London, England, because everyone in England wants to meet the famous Pocahontas, the famous Indian princess who saved John Smith's life. Unfortunately, shortly after arriving in England, Pocahontas gets very, very sick. Her body can't handle the germs in Europe. While she is in England, she runs into an old friend, someone she hasn't seen in a very long time, John Smith. And she is shocked to see him because she, for many years, had believed John Smith was dead. And so what ends up happening is while Pocahontas is very sick, her husband, Jack, is asked how Pocahontas and John Smith met. And so much of the movie is a flashback to how Pocahontas, young Pocahontas, met John Smith and became so close. You will, in the end, find out, number one, how they met, and two, how she came to believe John Smith was dead for all these years. And most importantly, you will find out if Pocahontas survives her illness. So I hope you enjoy the movie. I should say movies, because you'll see my buddy Mr. Betts too.